Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Scott Stedman podcast. And today we are doing our year in review of 2023 of the Scott Stedman podcast. We have had a lot of episodes produced. We have had guest speakers. We have gone where no podcast has gone before, at least in the history of Scott Stedman podcast. And we've kind of worked through some of these. I guess at the beginning we may call it controversy, but after 3 episodes of talking about this, it wasn't too much of a controversy in some ways. But at least I didn't think it was. So we're going to talk about all that in our year in review. But joining me today is Micah Current. Micah, what's going on, my friend?
Well, I think that, based on what you just said, like it absolutely proves that if you have a conversation, whether it's over a podcast, a cup of coffee, or wherever, that you may not know the whole story until you talk to somebody about it.
Exactly. Absolutely. Wonderful.
But I'm doing okay. Yeah. It's hard to believe that we went through another year.
Yeah. Another year. Oh, hold on. I'm trying to. What happened to all my stuff? But yeah, so it's always hard because I think maybe it's getting older or maybe it's just being human, but I seriously cannot remember everything we have talked about or everything we have recorded in the past year. I don't know if you do, but I know I can't remember everything.
Well, I pulled up a list, so I think
He's making a list and checking it twice. Yeah, so the very first episode that we ever recorded in 2023 was the Matt Chandler scandal, the second part of it, when they finally restored him, and we were still confused about why he got fired why he had to leave the absence in the first place. It's like, what did he do? So yeah, that was interesting. That was episode 162. Very first episode, and that was on January 6th is when that was posted. And we also hit our 200th episode this year. So that was crazy. 200 episodes. So yeah, that was pretty big too. And yeah, it's been wild. Probably now this is debatable, and maybe you might just know this off the top of your head, but each podcast server. So for those who don't understand the backstage of podcasting, we have a podcast server, and the podcast servers gives us some statistics as far as how many downloads and all this information. But then like when we have it like go to other platforms like Spotify, Apple Music, or any other type of podcasting sites, they have their own statistics because, again, listeners listen to podcasts on various platforms. They find us in different ways, and especially if you post a video one up on YouTube, there's a lot of different things. So with all that being said, Micah, according from our audio listening podcast on our podcast server, what do you think was our most downloaded episode this year?
It's hard to tell, man. We covered so many different topics. Like the communications one was last year, right?
Communications one, that was over 1,000. That one was still going to be, that one's still our highest, but that was last
But
year.
that was in 2022 though, right?
That was in 2022. Yeah. So 2023, it according to all-time downloads was 100.
Okay.
Compared to compared to the thousands of church communication from last year, which that blew up.
Well, considering we did 52 episodes, I don't even know where to start. Like the Asbury revival, maybe.
Oh, that's a good guess, but no.
The Jim Lyons retirement and the future of the Church of God.
Nope, not that one. That one's up to, on my end, that's up to 50. So, but it's not the highest.
Church of God and Church of God Affirm. Was that the highest one?
It was the Church of God, the Church of God, and it's funny because on Spotify, when I look at the results on Spotify, the most streamed. Now that's different because this is download. This one's streamed. The most streamed episode according to Spotify, was the Church of God Affirmed Part 2.
Okay.
But as far as downloads, the very first one, Church of God Affirmed, that was the highest one of 100 downloads. Then we did 3 episodes, 2 just kind of our reflections of Church of God and Church of God Affirmed, and then the third one was actually interviewing the original authors of
Founders,
the website, the founders. But that was good. Actually, another interesting statistic is 81% of our listeners discovered us this year. According to Spotify Wrap or to Spotify for Podcaster, 81% of your listeners discovered you in 2023. Ain't that something? That's something. And then not only that, but then probably the funniest one is the people who listen to the Scott Stedman podcast. Their top 3 podcast genres are religion and spirituality, which duh. Number 2 is comedy. And number 3 was true crime. So our listeners listen to religion and spirituality, comedy, and true crime. So, wow, that is, and of course, our listeners, according to Spotify, our listeners' most top music genres is pop, CCM, and rap. So if you're listening to the Scott Stedman podcast, we know that you like to listen to a good pop album, a good CCM album, and a good rap album. Oh, there's just a lot of statistics.
Yeah, I think when I did, because I'm a Spotify subscriber, and I have a lot of different genres, and it's amazing what you listen to throughout the year, and like the number of minutes you listen to, and how they're able to break that down and have that conversation and give you your Spotify Wrapped every year. Like, so, I have a student worker at Miami who's obsessed with Taylor Swift, and so Taylor Swift is like my number 3 because she's always listening to it in my office. So but then like number 1 or number 2 is John Williams and film scores, because I love to listen to film scores.
Yeah. But, so our podcast server, most downloaded episode, Church of God Affirmed.
Okay.
Spotify says our most streamed episode is Church of God Affirmed Part 2.
What was our least streamed?
I don't know. They don't tell you that.
They don't tell you the bad news.
But the most shared, now this is the most shared episode, the episode that people have shared either through direct links or whatever, was episode 200 when we interviewed Karma and Nick from Church of God Affirmed. So our top episodes all revolve around Church of God Affirmed. So
how do you feel about that with all the stuff we covered?
You know what, though? I feel
all the different topics. I mean, because we covered a variety of things: mental health, divorce, serving in churches, Matt Chandler, Asbury, Church of God Affirmed. Like, there were just so many different topics that we covered over the year. Like, for me, I'm like, well, I was surprised. Like, yes, I think people really wanted to know the scoop because they wanted their voice to be heard, and they really wanted to know what they were about. So I'm not surprised that they got a lot of listens and a lot of downloads, because people wanted to know.
People wanted to know. And to be honest, I think that was big because we were able to have the conversation. We were able to give a platform, and we weren't kind of being like mysterious. I always go back, if Church Scott Anderson didn't put that weird cryptic post about, hey, there's people who say the right, like, because I really had no clue who the heck. I don't think anybody would have known who Church God Affirmed was, except for the few people that knew about it, like on the inside, and maybe a few kind of word of mouth things. I think in some ways the Church of God kind of gave exposure to them that they probably didn't want to, but at the same time, I think it was good because then we were able to have a conversation and kind of get down right to the root of everything and have a conversation from the source. And I think at that end, that's been kind of very fruitful conversation. I think at least for me, I felt like, oh, okay, at least I kind of know a lot more about, not only about what Church of God Affirms about, but also know more about the people and kind of the background and the genesis of why they kind of started this in the first place. So I think that's great. Another statistical thing is since last year, we have seen an increase by 231% in our streams. I'm like, okay, that's good.
Well, at least we're not doing it for nothing, right? People are listening.
That's right. Whoops. Hold on. Here's some other. Sorry, I'm clicking too fast. You are a top 10 podcast for 12 fans. It's according to Spotify. You're a top 5 podcast for 10 fans. And drum roll, please. Oh, come on. Just give me the goods. You're the number 1 podcast for 3 fans. So there are 3 fans out there who, if the Scott Stedman podcast doesn't post something on a Friday, they are crushed. They cry. They weep. It's like that Wolverine meme. They sit there and they look at that picture frame, and there's the picture, the logo of the Scott Stedman podcast. So, yeah. And your top fans listen to you 7.6 times more than any other of your listeners, my top fans. 66% are return listeners. And yeah. And that's pretty much all the stats that I'm getting from Spotify, unless there's another weird. Nope. That's it. Thank you for sharing your podcast to the world. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Spotify. But yeah. Oh, but we also created 2.3 thousand minutes of content, according to Spotify. 2.3 thousand. This was back when they dropped everything at the beginning of, like, towards the end of November. So there's still more content that we've been producing this month in December that's not accounted for in this statistic. But yeah, that's pretty crazy to think about, you know.
So what was your favorite episode that we did all year?
Ooh, my favorite episode. Wow, that's a great question. I think probably my favorite episode. Whew.
I mean, we did a lot.
We did. I mean, we could go back. I mean, we talked about the whole Saddleback Church, ordaining women as ministers. And then we did that at the beginning of the year. Then halfway through the year, that's when we found out that they've been disavowed because of it. And we did a podcast on that. You know, there was the thing about church conventions and why they're on the decline. You know, we talked about church staffing. We talked about pastoral PTSD, and we also had some great interviews. We had Jeanette Flynn on our show at least a couple times. We had Ashley and Carson Collins. We had Karma Wood and Nick Stanton Rourke. We also had Trey Oldham. We had Trey Oldham on our show. We had him twice. Once was just his ministry, and the other one was the when he came back from the COG convention and kind of talked about that. There's a lot. We did the way of subtle ways Christians are judgmental. I thought that was pretty good. We talked about.
I love how you're not telling me what your favorite is, though.
I know. It's hard. It's hard. And of course, you know, recently we did the church ghosting one, which was, and then we probably have some that we haven't even uploaded yet that were probably maybe my favorites. But I think all the ones we have uploaded, you know, I really enjoyed the conversation we had with Jeanette about church health and life cycles.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was very informative. That was really great. And I think in some ways that was good, not only for churches, but even to look at even just like things like camps. Because recently I booked a retreat center for confirmation for my students next year. And, you know, we booked it, but then I also got a letter. They also sent me a letter too, letting me know that they're selling off their camp.
Mm.
You know, so they'll have a summer camp into 2024. And then after that summer camp, that's it. Done.
A lot of campgrounds are doing that.
a lot of campgrounds are doing that. I know the Ohio Church of God State Camp did that a couple years back. So that's nothing new. But yeah, I feel like that was probably my favorite one, just the life cycles and how do you everything has a life cycle, and how do you kind of reinvent yourself so you don't get caught into that pattern of growth and life and death in a church's life cycle. So I thought that was probably one of my favorite episodes this year.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Michael? What was your favorite episode?
Well, I mean, I probably would have picked the Jeanette one, but since you picked that one,
of course.
No, I mean, like, I just no, I love work. I love Jeanette. I love working with her, and we're actually in the early conversations now, like of having her come back early next year, or in 2024, and talk about. She's been doing a lot of work recently as an interim pastor, and she served at I think 3 different churches over the last couple of years as an interim. And she told me over the weekend that she's been writing a lot of material down about the process of being an interim, what it looks like to be an interim. So looking forward to having her back. I don't know, like you know, the one we did on Thanksgiving and mental health, I really enjoyed that one because I shared a lot of what was going on with me. I We talked about the rise of Christian media. That was a cool one because it, just different movie projects and how it can kind of, you know, deter from the real meaning of Christianity. And I always love the outreach conversations we have. But I think, you know, um, when we talked about the Asbury revival and how people were trying to recreate that, that was probably like that was a very trendy thing last year,
Oh
or
yeah.
in 2023. And so like everybody's trying to like catch lightning in a bottle, and like, is this going to just, is revival going to break out all over the country? And which I'm not saying it can't, but it's people went and they saw it and said that it was a real thing, and things are really, the Spirit of God was really moving in that space and in that time. But then you saw people try to like recreate that where they were at. And just the conversation we had about that, and how it how it was impacting local churches. And so yeah, probably the Asbury revival. But I also
Yeah.
love the interviews, man. Like, I love talking to you on Monday mornings and doing the kind of the one-on-one thing. But like whenever we get a chance to do interviews with people, whether it's pastors or you know, people part of a group or something, like, the Chaga firm, or having Jeanette or Trey come back from Leadership Focus, or, having, was it Ashley and Carson Collins talking about their
Oh yeah.
marriage problems and leaving the Church of God, and now they're involved in the UMC, and
Yeah.
just that reconciliation. Like, I really like interviewing people too. So,
Yeah. I mean, and ideally, like, I mean, I can look at all of them, and just even like looking just back on downloads, like besides the Church of God Affirm stuff, which kind of have our highest downloads, the next big one was when we talked about church New Year traditions and covenants, which was like probably our third episode into 2023, and that had like 86 downloads from our podcast server, which I thought was pretty cool. Like that was something that I definitely was not expecting to happen, but it did. So yeah, there was just a lot of great stuff. And then even not only that, but then even just some of the comments we've gotten from some of the listeners, some of the great comments people have made, some of the some of the observations that they made, whether it was whether it was a private thing or a public thing, like through just the comment section on YouTube. Like, there was a lot of great updates from our fans. And again, I like getting the emails. I like hearing stuff. Sometimes I like hearing controversy, like Like, I mean, I know I shared this with you in private, but I mean, I had someone call me because someone said, "Hey, on the Scott Stedman podcast, I think someone was sharing your story," and they went and they listened to it, and they're saying, "Oh, they're basically putting pressure that I need to take down this episode or whatnot." And the person listened to it and they go, "Absolutely not. Don't take it down. It's great. I love it. I think it's a great episode, and there's a lot of great stuff you guys said about it. So keep it up." So okay, we're keeping it up. So yeah,
What
it's
was
never
your
a dull.
Yeah, go ahead. Never dull moment.
No, finish. There's never a dull moment on the Scott Stedman podcast.
So we talked about our favorite. What was your least favorite?
Oh, my least favorite.
I have one.
Okay,
because
what's your least? Why don't you go?
We'll let you figure it out. So for the listeners, Scott will text me throughout the week, and then sometimes he gets busy and he'll text me Saturday or Sunday, and what are you thinking for Monday? And we usually have like a running list of ideas and topics that we want to hit in reference to recording the podcast. And we got kind of down to the bottom of the barrel, and Scott was like, "Well, I really want to do an episode on stewardship." And I was like, "I don't want to do an episode on money. I don't want to do an episode on stewardship." And they're like, "Come on, we'll do it. We'll be fine." Turns out, like, even though I was dreading it, it ended up being one of like my more favorite episodes that we recorded, even though I was dreading the topic itself, because I was like, anytime you talk about money, it's going to be, a difficult conversation. And so, I think that we took it kind of in a direction that was better than I initially thought, right? Because I thought that, we were going to, talk about fundraising and talk about, how churches don't have money, but we also talked about, the idea of stewardship and how it can help with transitions, how it can help with succession plans, how it can help further the kingdom, how to not sit on that money for 100 years and not use it, how to better the church and facilities. And it was just a really good conversation. It wasn't that I didn't like it. I was just dreading the topic when we got kind of the bottom of our barrel of topics when you we were giving me the list of episodes that we wanted to do.
Yeah, man, my least favorite one.
Chalk Town Hall. I was kidding. I was looking at the list.
I guess maybe because maybe that was it, because I don't know. It's stuff like that where anytime when we're having conversations about, I know there's a town hall that came out last week that I didn't watch.
I didn't either, but I saw it. I saw that there was one.
I saw there was one, but I didn't really watch it. But I think, sometimes
they also do a great job of advertising that, hey, this is what we're doing.
Yeah, I don't know. I think probably my I guess maybe my least favorite one would probably be, when we talked about church conventions being on decline, because I don't know, like, I think it's the same way I feel about camp. I feel like youth conventions or camp summer camps, I feel like that there's always a lot of good that comes out of those. So the fact that they're declining, and the fact that, people aren't getting the amount of students or the amount of effect as they were back when I was a teen. I almost kind of feel like it's my least favorite because I think it's just so heartbreaking. I don't think necessarily the content was bad in that episode. I just think just talking about, oh yeah, another church camp's closing. Oh, another convention's kind of going out the window. Or, hey, I went to this. Or, hey, numbers were really low at the Church of God regional convention because it was too expensive and
people can't afford to travel and inflation and whatever. And,
yeah. So I think it's stuff like that where you think about, like, how things keep going up. Like even recently, I was talking with one of my staff members, and I was just telling her about, different missions trips possibilities. And I said, one of the hardest things about doing a missions trip, especially if you're doing it out of state, or like really far out of state, like a couple states away, is just travel, because it's really hard for you to try to rent a 12 or 18 passenger van. Like even just renting one, like I even like last year, I like looked way ahead to try to figure out, okay, can we rent a vehicle? And I couldn't find anything to rent. And thankfully, if it wasn't for the East Ohio Conference, their youth program that said, hey, we have a couple people, we want to fill up a charter bus, do you want to tag along with us? Like, we'd probably just have to get a bunch of chaperones saying, okay, you're driving, and we're going to have to drive like 18 people down to Charlotte, North Carolina, and down to Florida, and say, hey, keep track of your receipts so the church can reimburse you, or consider this a donation of your gas and your wear and tear on your vehicle, but that's hard. And even just thinking like, okay, if we're going to fly somewhere, you have to do that. And then you have to figure out, okay, where are we going to drive now? Or can I get a bunch of Ubers to send a bunch of people over? It's getting to the point where, unless you are not blessed to have your own like church bus or church van, like, traveling now is becoming very expensive and very challenging, especially with large groups.
Mm-hmm. So I know Jordan was talking about that a couple of weeks ago with, like, I think he had to get through the same thing where he was renting a van for something, and he was telling me how expensive it was. And even if the church has some vans, they had to rent some extras. So like, it's just, yeah, things are expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, I've been seeing now where people have been buying 18 passenger vans and then like kind of throwing them up on Airbnb or some type of site, and then you can kind of like Airbnb a van that you need. And I'm thinking, if I can find an 18 passenger van from like one of those like government auction sites from the state of Ohio that used to be like a prison transport bus, I'd pick one up in a heartbeat. I got a bus for $5 from the government. Don't worry about the blood stains or the hooks for you people to hook their feet to the bottom of the bus when you're transporting prisoner kids. But yeah, I would say, so I'd say, again, I think we had kind of more of a smorgasbord of topics that we discussed, but I think we definitely had more interviews with people this year than we did last year, by a lot. And I think that, next year I'm excited to see what type of stuff comes on the horizon and what's the kind of things to talk about. Maybe, I mean, I might be too soon, but we might have a couple of more information about the successor of Church God Ministries, since Jim's retiring. I know they're kind of doing a prayer thing, kind of taking this time of season to pray and trying to figure out like a job description, I guess, or whatever they're trying to do. And then we're probably going to find information about it as far as, what they're looking for in a general director. And we'll probably be commenting on that too.
What are some other topics that you're thinking for next year, or some stuff that you would like to do, or?
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Well, I'd love to have Trey come back, like you said, and Jeanette's coming back, and talk about some stuff with interim pastoring, and maybe have Trey come back and do some more stuff about leadership focus. Maybe we can, get some other guests. I've talked to Leo and Megan Flores, good friends of mine. They're worship leaders and really want to talk about, the heart of worship and songwriting and things like that.
I've reached out to one of my buddies who did church planning, and he planted a church in Ashland, and they just celebrated their 10-year anniversary just this past month. I haven't heard anything back, but I do know a buddy of mine was also a church planter, and he's now the oh my gosh, I can't think of the technical name, but he's the campus pastor at AU now. So it'd be nice to talk to him.
What's his
Josh
name?
Tandy.
Yes.
Tandy.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So
he actually, before he got the job at AU, he was looking for a worship pastor at the church he planted. And I was transitioning out of a church, and he and I had a conversation, and I think it was right when he got offered the job at AU, and so that opportunity for me kind of went out the window. But yeah, I know Josh.
Yeah, so it'd be nice to talk about him about kind of starting in ministry, because I know when he first started ministry, he had a blog called The Rookie Pastor, and I know I was reading it and even like kind of commented on some of his posts too as he's kind of starting out in ministry. So just kind of that journey of going from, church planner to kind of coming back to AU. And actually, I just saw that another friend of mine who I went to AU with, who was doing a bunch of different ministries, she's now working at AU. So I feel like that's always interesting too, just finding these people who, from Anderson, from college, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, they're working for the university now, and how much it's different. Or so I think that'd be good, just to have more interviews with people. I think that'd be good. I think it'd be good just to hear, try to figure out some technical things, because I know I tried to play that one video, that one trailer for that movie that obviously did not work out very well. So you wouldn't know it because I edited that section out. There's just a bunch of silence until you say, "Hey, Scott, we can't hear anything." Yeah. So I mean, and again, I think the one thing I'm looking forward to is hopefully, as we keep seeing increases in our listenership and everything else, I wouldn't be surprised if we have more people engaging with us in the comment section or emailing us, because I always love getting those emails. I always love like sharing that mail on the podcast. And yeah, I'm very excited for what next year is. And hopefully, things will start to slow down for me, so I actually have time to really write down some, future episodes, because sometimes there's some months where literally we hit the bottom of the barrel and we're just like, okay, we're just going to throw something at the wall and we'll try to make magic out of something.
You're not supposed to tell the listeners, Scott, that we throw it together at the last minute sometimes.
Hey, you know what? It would be good, since we did that episode about Kat Von D. I don't know if we can do it, but I wouldn't mind having her on the Scott Stedman podcast. That'd be fun. Just to kind of, I would have to listen to the other stuff she's been on so that we're not asking the same question. Because I know, like, as a person who interviews someone, I'm always like, well, I don't want to ask the same questions that someone would already ask them already. Try to find something a little bit different that might be a bit fruitful. So it's not just like the same old, same old. It's like, oh, I've already heard this before. Makes it fresh for the person being interviewed, and it makes it fresh for the listener as they're hearing something different that they haven't heard already. So, yeah.
I mean, possibilities are endless, right?
The possibilities are endless.
Stories gone wild. I can't wait to come up with more stories.
You know what? I'm thinking about revamping some of that stuff too. I'm thinking when we have guests, we won't do stories gone wild, but we might do like thinking about doing like maybe like a speed round of something where we just ask them a question and they have to say the first thing off their head, and just ask them 5 questions, like a 5 for 5. but that might be trademarked by Arby's, right?
You should do that to me every week. 5 for 5. Like,
oh my gosh. Maybe that's what we'll do. We'll just try it out as an experiment with each other. It's just going to work when we have guests. Let's do a 5 for 5. So I'll ask you 5 questions and you give me the first thing that hits top of your head.
You may not want to know the answers.
What's your least favorite cat right now?
Buddy. He's doing better now. It's okay.
It's okay.
He
just had a bad morning. He
did have a bad morning, and they took me with him.
All right. Oh goodness. But yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to. What about you, Michael? What are you looking forward to next year? What ideas that you have that you would want us to try to explore on the Scott Stedman podcast?
Probably just like I said before, I like interviewing people and having conversations. And I know that you and I have a lot of connections, ministry wise, and having more guests on our show to talk about life and ministry and talking about different topics in their maybe their area of ministry, whether it's worship or young adults or student ministry or children's ministry or even lead pastors or even different types of ministry, prison ministries, outreach ministries, etc. And just talk about special topics like that. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, it's funny because a lot of times you and I will find articles and we'll be like, hey, let's do one on this, or what's the latest documentary that came out, or what's the most crazy thing that just happened in Church God Ministries or Hillsong United or, whatever church it is. But yeah, probably interviewing people and having conversations would be what I'm looking forward to the most, and maybe having more conversations steered towards worship since that's kind of my specialty.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so friends, thank you so much for being on this journey with us. Another year of podcast listening. Thank you so much. I mean, we couldn't have done this without your faithful listening and comments and just your love and support for us, or even for those of you who are haters of the Scott Stedman podcast. We couldn't do it without you either, because we love hearing those dirty emails and we like reading them on the air live about some of the things you say that you don't like about our show. So with all that being said, I'm Scott, and I can't wait to bring new episodes into the new year of 2024. Take care.